Esmé Hogeveen is our first reader. So Esmé is a writer and editor based in Tkaronto, Toronto. She organizes Oral Method, an experimental reading series, and her criticism and essays have appeared in Artforum, Bookforum, Frieze, the LA Review of Books, and the New York Times. Let's welcome Esmé. Woo!
Hello. Thanks for coming. Okay, I thought that. Do I need to talk into the mic, or can I use my indoor voice? Okay. I'm going to stand here. I wasn't sure if you would explain the theme, but I feel like I should give a little bit of context for mine. So, memory, the gaps of memory, the tricks of memory, perceptual illusion were all words that were shared in advance of this event, and we were also invited to potentially read something we hadn't written. So I was thinking about things that have really stayed in my memory but become warped or strange over time. And one of the things that came to mind and sort of stayed in my mind was this story by Joyce Carol Oates called Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? Which is a story about a creepy man and a young woman in the 60s. And at first I thought I'll read the story. It's really long. I realized I wouldn't. And then I thought maybe I should write a story about the story and about hearing the story and how it's kind of stayed in my memory. So this is fiction, but also now I've just told you it's not really fiction, so you can work with that. And it's very much a work in progress, so thank you, work in progress, and thanks to Rose and Parker. Okay, it's called The Home Stretch. I'm just like talking at the microphone now. The home stretch. And the teacher said, "It's potentially worth noting that the numbers in the story add up to 69. The girl raised her hand confidently. As a student, she was eager to share her thoughts or offer an answer if she had one, but also to answer questions when the insights that the teacher guided the class towards didn't make sense or convince her." Have a sip. The teacher swiveled on his back heel to face the girl. Yes, and then he said the girl's name in a way that was somehow both cursory and intimate. The girl looked through her notes. The night before, she had highlighted the short story in 2 colors, yellow for the passages that moved her upon first reading, and blue for the sections she thought were important for symbolic interpretation. She didn't recall noting any numbers. The teacher waited patiently. His rapt attention was almost the opposite of their dynamic on the first day of term, when the teacher had observed the girl highlighting a copy of the grade 12 writer's craft syllabus. He'd watched her alternate between neon colors and a cheap ballpoint pen for the better part of an hour, and finally remarked, "This class works a lot better with 20 or fewer students. So if anyone thinks this is a free period or a time to doodle, please consider opting out." His eyes moved around the room, taking in the new cohort's reaction, and came to rest on the girl. Her hand was still moving as she paraphrased his last instruction. "Consider opt out." She dotted the period and looked up, suddenly aware that the teacher had misunderstood her purpose in marking up the photocopied pages. She felt her cheeks burn, but was determined to hold his stare. The teacher's eyes, she realized, were the crystal blue of artificially flavored candy or construction crew spray paint melting into fresh snow. When he'd handed out the syllabus in a William Carlos Williams poem, the girl noticed sinewy dark tattoos peeking out like frilled cuffs beneath his fully buttoned shirt sleeves. Now, staring up at his face, she saw more ornate, thinly drawn markings above his collar. In November, the students would study literary devices and give presentations about their assigned device using only that mechanism to explain it. The more tools in your arsenal, the teacher insisted, the more intentional you can be about creating meaning. Have you ever had an experience you struggled to express in words? That's probably something worth writing about. The girl would then recall locking eyes with the teacher on the first day and recognizing a woman's name written in tiny cursive letters on his neck. No one's presentation had described focusing so closely on one thing that its edges slid into view. It was early spring when the teacher assigned Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? A short story by Joyce Carol Oates, whom the girl knew very little about. The class had started by reading short stories and then switched to novels right before the Christmas break. Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire, Dave Eggers' A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, Michael Ondaatje's The Collective Works of Billy the Kid. Stories that fuck with what we expect a story to do, the teacher explained. As requested, a few students dropped the class after the first week or two, and the remaining group jockeyed for status as a teacher's leading interpretive accomplices. The students grew attuned to how mood could subtly shift thanks to a deaf metaphor, and how a narrator could be simultaneously compelling and untrustworthy. Most recently, the class read Ham on Rye by Charles Bukowski. The girl could tell that the teacher loved this book the most. The way he read the passages aloud reminded her of when her father listened to Neil Young so loudly on the car stereo that her mother would roll down the passenger window and scream. Where are you going, where have you been was partly inspired by a Bob Dylan song, the teacher told the class. Which one? Asked a boy who the girl once thought she might kiss before her friend had vomited in between them at a party. The teacher cued It's All Over Now, Baby Blue on the desktop computer and turned the speaker volume all the way up. Another teacher, a man who taught the regular grade 12 English class, where they read Shakespeare and George Eliot, popped his head into the room. He was friendly with the writer's craft teacher, and the girl sometimes saw the two chatting in the parking lot, which reminded her that they were men and existed in worlds where she didn't. Take what you have gathered from coincidence, drawled Dylan, and the English teacher grinned at his colleague. Oats Day? You know it. The girl wrote down, take, gather, coincidence. Spooky, said the English teacher. The school was small, and the girl got used to seeing the teacher in the hallways. They usually waved or nodded at one another when passing, and eventually they would stop and chat. Eventually they began to stop and chat. If the teacher seemed unhurried, the girl would ask him questions about books she was reading for other classes. The teacher encouraged her to think more about what Gatsby might be hiding, and about what happened between Nick and Mr. McKee in the elevator. He asked her what music she was listening to and what it felt like to be in the home stretch, the final year of obligatory school, or the final obligatory year of school. Sometimes she'd try to write down their conversations, but his word choices were so specific that she couldn't capture them unless she was in class live recording with her notebook and her color-coded school supplies. She told him she was thinking of taking a year off before university. What did he think of that? What did he think of that? I think it's only, what's right for you. That's a cliche. The teacher laughed. Honestly, I think you more than most people need to go and see the world. But isn't that also a cliche? Sometimes you just have to pick one and roll with it, said the teacher dryly. One day the teacher appeared in the cul-de-sac where the girl and her friends ate lunch. Is he coming to talk to you? None of her friends were in the writing class, but they knew about the teacher with the full sleeves who sometimes talked to students about his marital problems and adolescent drug use. One friend's older sister had taken writer's craft the year the teacher got in trouble for drinking with students after prom. Or else she had heard the prom drinking story from an even older generation of students and passed it along. Or maybe it had happened at a school concert or on a field trip. It was something like that. Or maybe there was more than one story, or a story about another teacher, and the details had gotten all mixed up. He's an amazing teacher, though, the friend's older sister said when they'd pressed her for details. You should definitely take his class. The teacher hadn't smiled or waved, but the girl knew he was coming for her, so she stood up and moved away from the group. The taupe-colored lockers in this hallway had been deadbolted to discourage students from hanging out in an unused part of the building, so far from the main doors in the principal's office. The teacher pressed his knee at a 90-degree angle against one of the lockers to balance the worn leather satchel he was trying to open. He unbuckled the bag and pulled out a slim hardcover without a dust jacket. I think this could be important for you, he said. The girl didn't recognize the title, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, or the author, Italo Calvino. Without a cover, there were no other clues about the book's contents, and the combination of title and author made her think of an Italian resort or a pasta. She liked to joke with the teacher, but she didn't want to say anything about pasta right now. Thank you, she demurred. Of course you hang out here, the teacher commented, refastening his bag. The cool grade 12s always do. His Doc Marten left a mark on the locker where he'd held his knee up to balance the bag. As the teacher walked back in the direction he'd come from, the girl opened the book and saw another woman's name written in pencil on the second page. That night, the girl read the Out story twice. It was about a 15-year-old named Connie who gets approached by a strange man who turns out to be a lot older and creepier than she first realizes. The man drives a gold car and has messy black hair that might be a wig. He uses expressions that are no longer cool to try to seem young and hip with the kids. At a pivotal moment of the story, Connie's parents and sister decide to go to a family gathering, and Connie decides to stay home alone. She gets bored and listens to rock music on the radio, and then the scary guy comes to the house and tells her she has to leave with him. The story is kind of freaky, but the girl mostly forgets about it until the next week when the class meets again. When they discuss the story, she realizes how scary it actually is. The male character is planning to rape the girl, maybe to murder her, and he's walking strangely in his boots and leaning on his car because he maybe has hoofs, which means he's maybe the devil. Lots and lots of blue highlighting. The teacher has been facilitating the class's conversation, and they're learning more about Connie's vulnerabilities. The girl realizes that he's such a good teacher because he makes the students think they're coming up with their own answers, their own ideas, but really, the teacher knows the answers and has probably had some of these conversations dozens of times with other classes. Sometimes the girl can guess where the teacher's guiding them, but sometimes she's really confused. It's potentially worth noting that the numbers in the story add up to 69, the teacher says. The girl finds the reference to the numbers, 33, 19, 17. Sorry, what does 69 mean? The girl asked the teacher. Oh, come on, the teacher said. The teacher says her name again. You know. I don't know, the girl laughs. Should I be embarrassed? Come on, the teacher says again, but this time he seems less like a buddy, and his eyes whip around looking for a student anxious to fill the gap. It's something he can't say, not yet. The end.